Hello, Garret. Thank you for meeting with us this morning. So firstly, just tell us a little bit about your upcoming release.
The movie is Who Is Dervla Murphy, feature documentary about the great travel writer Dervla Murphy from Lismore in County Waterford. It was a hard project to do because Dervla's not that forthcoming in terms of being on screen or even been interviewed. So it took a long time to convince her to do this, but I think she saw the value in having sort of a record of such on screen of her life and her work, as much as we could achieve in the sort of 70 minutes of a film. How do you condense someone's life down into that? So that's what it is, and it's a chance, I suppose, for people who are fans of hers or those that haven't quite engaged with her to get a sense of who she is and to discover, I suppose, the person behind the words. And I think the film does reveal that. It gives you a good insight into the character that she is and the way that she approaches her writing, her subjects, and life in general. So it features some great contributors in Manchán, Magan, Michael Palin, and John Murray, her former publisher as well. Thank you very much.
Were you familiar with Dervla beforehand, or how did you happen upon this story? I mean,
I wasn't. I knew of her, but I wasn't as. I hadn't read her work at that stage. But what happened was I was producing a radio program with Manchán called The Big Adventure. It was for Radio 1. And at the start of that whole process, Manchán was talking about the different types of things he'd like to do, and he said, look, if you could achieve one thing for us on this programme, I'd love to meet Dervla Murphy. She is an icon in my eyes. And I said, okay, and Martina was helping on that show as well. So I think Martina wrote a letter to Dervla and said, look, we'd like to come down to Lismore to interview you. Manchán would like to interview you for this programme. So I can't remember if she rang or she wrote back, but she said yes, so we arranged a date, and the three of us headed off in the car down to Lismore to go to the old market to meet Dervla. And we were there all day. I was producer recorder and Manchán was interviewing, but by the time we left I was captivated by this woman. I thought to just spend some time in her company is amazing. And so in the car journey back, the discussion arose was, how come she's not more well known, say in today's media, in terms of how, people get recognition for doing very little, and why isn't there a visual documentary that kind of profiles her? And that started it, and myself and Martina really got kind of dogged about it, in the sense that let's try and get something made. And I think over the next couple of months Martina started writing to her handwritten letters and started a conversation, and Dervla for a while was kind of like no, and we sort of kept asking and talking, and eventually she said yes. And then it was...
You got her on a good day then.
Got her on a good day, but then it was still, I think, if not sort of a year and a half to 2 years before she eventually appeared on camera from that point as well. So it was a long process. But that's how it began, just by meeting her. And then obviously I became completely enthralled and wanted to know more and more as a sort of filmmaker. So I came at it from that angle. And so I was very much taken by the person first and the work afterwards.
And it's interesting because recently we've seen Claire Dix's Memories of Miss Moriarty and Jerry Gregg's Close to Evil, Tommy Rykenstall's story, and it kind of makes you wonder, is Ireland just full of these characters from who have just managed to avoid the limelight, but have these absolutely remarkable stories, very much worth telling?
I think that is the case, and I think it's far more pure because to them the work is first.
Yes.
And it has grown from an age that is different to what we're in now, where you don't have substance a lot of the time behind what gets traction, and we're very reactive now to certain things. And so I think it's shameful that we don't appreciate work like this, and it probably takes a bit of time for that to happen. And yeah, I think there are so many interesting people and so many vibrant, creative, culturally significant figures in Ireland, and just to do a small part of something on someone. I mean, her work ultimately is the what people should be drawn to, but just to have a small documentary profiling her is a nice addition to that, to at least, I suppose, in an attempt, hopefully bring it to a wider audience and have people go back to the source material and have a record and have people go and pick up Full Tilt and read it.
Yeah, or Wheels Within Wheels.
Or Wheels Within Wheels.
That's my next one. So, like, when you took on this project, was there anything specific that you wanted to capture? I mean, obviously she's been had a very prolific career in writing, but quite a remarkable personal life as well. Choosing to be a single mother in a time where it was completely taboo, and she seems to have had quite a rocky relationship with her daughter as well, and you captured quite well Rachel's pain and kind of to an extent the loss of her mother as well.
As you go into a project obviously taken by the person and their work, and it's when you get to know them and you get to know a little bit about them that other pieces of it start to fall into place. And I think when that sort of occurs, you have to handle it very carefully on screen. And I think her personal approach to things is very much framed who she is, and we wanted to just give a little bit of a snapshot of that. And because Rachel travelled with her so much when she was younger, she was always we were always going to interview her, but what transpired was obviously that, they've had this difficult relationship up and down, and so it felt like, we needed to just have a slight reference to that in the film, and that you can actually see mother and daughter, at times kind of trying to work things out and trying to figure things out. And honesty, I think, was something that we just wanted to bring out on screen. And I think Dervla had the same kind of attitude to it, like, let people say what they want to say, and I'll say what I want to say as well. And we're charged then with the responsibility of handling that in a certain way to give you that snapshot. And like, if you take Wheels Within Wheels and the difficulties that Dervla is addressing in that book, and the whole reason why she wanted to set off after all that. I mean, there's so much in there. It's such a big... that was very challenging to try and even get a little section of that in the film and to give that across, and her talking about her mother and the difficulties. And I think, again, you could only go so far that you thought, what, that's a little bit of it. Go and read the book now, and you'll discover that little bit more. There's pain there, there's suffering at times, and then there's a very healthy attitude to this is life and this is how we'll respond to it, and
a healthy attitude to death as well, because she says that she had such a response from the public afterwards, that there's this whole kind of expectation in traditional Ireland that you would look after your dying parents and you would do it dutifully, and that it wasn't spoken about, and that she came out and was kind of one of the first women to publicly say, I hated it. I couldn't wait for her to die. Like, peace enfolded me. And
such strong words.
Such strong words.
Yeah.
And such, amazing, unapologetic honesty.
Yeah. And, in dealing with her, it's like that as well, because you're there to try and talk to someone about these things, to have that very unnatural situation of, I've got a camera in the room and I'm going to ask you some questions. But even just as a filmmaker subject in terms of dealing with, she was like that as well. If she didn't like something, she would say it. If she wanted to move on, she would say it. And she was always in control in that regards. And we really got to know her in that respects. And when you've been through sort of that process with her and then you reread some of the stuff, you can say from the get-go she has been honest and true to her opinions and to her response to things, and she doesn't waver and she says it as it is, and that is, I think, is one of her great characteristics that you learn to respect and admire.
Yeah,
and certainly did.
I suppose on the technical side of things, then was there much, difficulty in the production process and getting it finished, because taking the phone off the hook for months on end, locking the gates, all of that kind of thing, like it must have been kind of a nightmare at times.
I don't think anybody believed we would ever get it made. I really don't. And I think as well at the beginning of the process, we had funders not come on board for that reason, because I think others in the past had attempted and never had gotten anywhere. I know the BBC had tried. Dervla told me a story about how she ran them the minute they arrived to do something because they started setting up, and she just thought, do you know what, I don't want this. And that was it. And so I don't think people believed that it was going to be possible, that she wouldn't do it, because she can be difficult that way. She just doesn't care. She doesn't feel that she needs it. And why would I do this? And if you cross that line at some stage, it could have been over in terms of making it. But we set up to have a very kind of good relationship with her. I think she liked it was a husband and wife team. I think in a way she liked the fact that we didn't have major backing behind us. It was two people who just decided they wanted to do this and were going to make it, and put themselves out there to make it. So I think that worked to our advantage to a certain degree in telling the story. Probably wouldn't have worked to our advantage in terms of the scale of the project, but in terms of actually just being in a room with her with a camera and getting a very, very intimate interview and an intimate access, that really worked. As opposed to, I suppose, the big production, who might have had a sort of an agenda or might have encroached too much on her world, that mightn't have happened. Getting access to her, it was difficult. We had to stay in touch with her publishers, in terms of trying to get access to her. Ringing her and she not answering, and it was, I find it hard to think back to it now, because I think in the process, which was curious, we interviewed everybody else first before we got to spend camera time with Dervla. We'd spent a lot of time with her. She got to know more about us than I did about her. She knew everything about us. Martina was pregnant at the time, and so there was a very sort of strong bond. We went for a lot of dinners with her, overnights, where she brought her friends to mingle with us, and she said, these are the guys that are making the film with me. Put us on a path to meet John Murray and Rachel and various different other people. And then when all that was over, we went to Lismore to spend the weekend where we would film with Dervla and do all our work with Dervla. So it was a long process. So I think by then she knew us wholeheartedly, and I do feel if along the way one person said, these aren't the pair to make this documentary, it possibly would have been over. So
luckily you did.
Luckily, yeah.
So the film is set for release on the 23rd?
23rd of April.
And where can people catch it?
At Movies at Dundrum and SGC in Dungarvan, so Dublin and Waterford. And then after that we'll look at a VOD release as well for it. In the traditional sense, I suppose, and it'll be possibly there for a week, because it is obviously a small release. But I think it's a good chance. It's played at a lot of festivals, so I don't know if we ever set out with the intent that it would be the big screen film, but the response from audiences at festivals was always a warm one, and people really enjoyed the experience of the company, of spending that time with her, and so we thought it would be a nice way to start its journey, this long form of it. And that's why we wanted this cinema release.